Hello everybody, it's Jane from Earth Palette here. Now today I'm going to show you how to over dye something. Now I don't have any garments that I really want to over dye, so I'm going to over dye this knitted sock blanket. Now a sock blanket is a machine knit piece of fibre. This one weighs 120 grams, so it's enough to knit a shawl, a reasonable size shawl, and I'm going to over dye it. It's already been dyed once with the Earth Palette dyes, but I'll over dye it and show you how that works out. Okay, so I'm going to dye it all in one dye bath, and I've got a bucket of water here. It's nothing in it, it's just water. Okay, and because we're going to dilute the dye down in here, it'll change the acid levels of that dye so it won't set properly. So once I've taken up the colour into my sock blank, I'm going to take it out, add a little bit of acid, which in this case I'll use vinegar because that quite likely is what you'll be using. Otherwise you can use citric acid instead, but vinegar is the most easily available to use. So I'm going to use Brilliant Red to over dye those. Now it won't change all of the colours very much, but it'll particularly change, sorry, I'll get this out of the way, the yellow and the orange, but the rest of the colours won't change a lot, but that's okay. I don't want to change it too much, so I'm going to put quite a bit of dye in there. I should have measured that, but anyway, so I'm probably going to put about 200 mils of dye in there, and then I'm going to drop in my sock blank, and I'm going to just gently move it around until a lot of that dye has been taken up by that sock blank. Move it around, or the dye tends to strike wherever it hits the dye first, wherever it hits the yarn first. So if you move it around, you'll get a much more even dye strike. So just gently moving it around. This is a superwash yarn, so I don't have too many worries about it felting, and it's a merino nylon blend yarn. You could use slightly warm water and it'll uptake that dye out of the water a little bit quicker, but it'll also give you a less even dye finish, because the warmer it is, the quicker it'll adhere to the fibre. So when you think it's mostly gone, we'll give it a squeeze out and lay it out and see how it looks. See if we're happy with the colour, and if we are, we'll stop there. So I might just grab it out without making it stretch too much. Give it a bit of a squeeze, don't wring it. There's no detergent or anything in there. That dye, when you make it up, if you use a bit of fixative A, that's what leaves the bubbles, because it's a surfactant or like a detergent. So this hasn't changed the colour hugely. What it has done is made the yellow go much more orange, so it's a more even colour tone throughout it all. So if you're happy with the colour when you've done one lot, stop there. If you want it darker, put some more dye into your dye bath. And I'm thinking we might add a little bit more and do it again, just to darken things up a bit. So I'll probably put about another 40 mil in there, I guess. Get it off the side so that it's all mixed in quite nicely, and then I'll just drop it in again, give it a bit more of a stir, until a lot of that colour has adhered to the yarn. Doesn't matter if there's a little bit of colour left in it. As I said, the bubbles is because there's a fixative A in that dye. Now, if you're dyeing something like this, you don't necessarily need to add that fixative A to your dye, but I already had it in mind because I was dyeing fleece, raw fleece before, that was greasy. But it won't hurt the yarn, that fixative A won't. Now, I haven't taken all the colour there, but I will take it out now. There's enough in there that I know this colour will just go a fraction darker. We'll give it a bit more of a squeeze. I'll have a look. And that's a better orange. I quite like that one actually. It's a much more uniform colour range. Okay, I'm happy with that. So what I'm going to do here is add a little bit more. I've got some water in there. I'll just get rid of it because I want to use the container. That was just water. I'm just going to add probably about, what does this say? 100 ml. 100 ml of vinegar into there, which is a slug. Give it a stir. And then I'm going to put my sock blank back in. Give it a bit of a stir to just absorb a little bit more of that dye. And then I'm going to leave it overnight until all that dye has absorbed into that fibre and that yarn. Okay, perhaps I better come back tomorrow morning and show you how it looks so that you can see that all that dye has been soaked up into the yarn and there won't be any colour left in that water. I'm going to leave it sitting here in my studio where it's about 25 degrees today. It won't need any heat to set those dyes, even though I've used cold water. That'll warm up this afternoon and that will absorb all that dye, and we'll have a look tomorrow how it is. So here's our sock blank. As you can see, there's a little bit of colour in the water still, and there's still a few bubbles from that fixative A that was in there, but I'm quite happy with the way it's absorbed most of that dye. I'll just give it a squeeze out. Just remember, this is superwash yarn, so I'm not too concerned about getting it felted. I might just move that bucket right off our table here. And it's certainly toned down that scarlet, so this sock blank is much more similar tones. It's pretty warm here today, it's 35 degrees Celsius. A huge change from the last few weeks we've been having, and we'll be back down to 22 degrees tomorrow, so very changeable weather. And it's still only beginning of September, so beginning of spring. So this sock blank has toned down quite nicely. I'm pretty happy with that, and I'll come back and show you to you when it's totally dry. So we're back with our sock blank. As you can see, where it was a goldy yellow is now a real orangey scarlet colour. It hasn't changed too much of the other colours. It may have changed them slightly, but not a lot. And I think this one is going to knit up pretty cool actually. This is a single strand sock blank, and I reckon this one's 120 grams, so it'll make quite a nice size shawl. I wouldn't use this for socks. I think there's far too much. I think it'd be wasted as a sock, but I would certainly use it as a shawl. Thank you very much for joining me. I hope this makes you feel a bit more confident about overdyeing something that you have that you would like to overdye and make it a more usable colour. Feel free to join us for our next video, and like and subscribe.